Okay, so the next thing that we need to consider is what to do about these two pancake flat meshes, because they don't look very consistent with this mesh, which is now roughly 100,000 millimeters in height, whereas these are only 1,000 millimeters in height based on the mesh default settings that were initially set as the thickness. I'm just trying to open this up so you can see as the thickness of the mesh. Okay, so if we go back to plan by pressing F2, then the first thing we should consider is that if you look on your survey and note that the RL levels along each of these points on this mesh should in fact be the same as on this mesh, and the same goes on this side. Okay, so the RL level of this point at B1, which is 100,720, the mesh point should be created here on the mesh at this point, at the same point, and be elevated to 100,720. Okay, and the same should go for this point here, which is 102,060. This point here, which is 102,470, and this point here, which is 100,060. Okay, so first you need to insert new nodes or new black dots so that you can then apply an RL level or a spot level to those nodes. Okay, so if you can recall how we created those or embedded those new nodes, on an edge, you click on the edge. Okay, either you can click it here or here, doesn't matter, because what will happen is when you click on the edge, the pet palette comes up and you need to have this icon selected or this button selected, which is insert new node. And if you click not at the intersection of where the B1 grid line is, then you do need to make sure you snap to the B1 grid line. So don't just click again here because it will set the node off the grid. So you want to click here when the pencil is black, and there is your node. Okay, and then we need another node over here. So again, clicking on the edge and then clicking on the intersection point here. So the tick mark's coming up. Okay, so now we need to click on this point, make sure this icon is active, so the Z icon, and then the height in relation to project 0 is 100,060. And then the height here is 100,720. Okay, and the height here is 102,060. And the height here is 102,470. Okay, so let's have a look at what happened in 3D now, or what's happened. Okay, so that means that this side, or the left-hand side of the neighbor, is fine. Okay, but it's this part here, these two remaining corners, this corner and this corner, which in plan relates to this corner and this corner, that needs to be fixed. Okay, so we're going to make a judgment call and change this corner to be the same as this one, which is 102,470, and this corner to be the same as this one, which is 100,060. So if you click here, go 100,060. Okay, and this one to be 102,470. Okay, so now if you look in 3D, it looks much better, doesn't it? Okay, so we now need to do the same thing for this mesh for this neighbor. Okay, so I have to proceed to click here. Oops, click on the edge, make sure it's the insert new node, make sure you insert on the grid. Okay, and here we go, and click, and at D5 and click, and at E5 and F5. So go click and click. Okay, just careful you don't move the mesh itself. If you are cleanly clicking on the edge when the Mercedes key comes up, and when the pet palette comes up, you're on this icon, you won't be moving the mesh itself. You won't be moving the whole mesh. Okay, so now let's apply the RL levels. Okay, so this one is 100, A10. This one is 100, 690. This one is, let's see, 101, 730. This one is 102, 140. And this one here is 102, 200. Okay, so let's have a look at what happened in 3D. Okay, great. All right, so now that edge, or the right hand side of the left hand neighbor mesh, is fine. And then we're going to make a judgment call again, and we're going to change this one to be the same as this one. Okay, so we're going as in RL, so 102, 200. Okay, and this one here to be 100, 8, 10. Okay, which is actually not the same as this one, it's the same as this one. Okay, and at this point, because this is a corner boundary, make a decision to also make this 100, 8, 10. Okay, because always going to have a little bit of a drop off there. Okay, so if you go into F3, then everything's fine there. Okay, actually, let's look what's going on here. Okay, now the reason that there's a bit of a peak up here, if you look in 3D, just here, is because there are no RL levels that are sitting along the very edge. Okay, it's not as high. All right, so what I'm going to do is make another judgment call, which is to insert nodes at the boundaries. Okay, because generally in a survey there will always be boundary RLs. Okay, even if it's generally just at the corner. Oh, actually, I'm going to delete that one. Okay, because there's actually no spot level here. What I'm going to do is match this spot level to this one, and this one to this one. But because there's no other spot level here, I don't really need this one. So I'm going to just delete it. Now, to delete a spot level, okay, or delete a node, you need to click on the node, and you need to have this icon selected, which node is move node. Okay, it's a different one to insert node, which is what you've been seeing so far. Because when you click on the edge, it brings up a different pet palette. Okay, so I'm clicking on the node itself, so not on the edge, but on the node itself. And then just to get rid of that node, I'm going to implode it onto another node, which just means place it on top of another node. Okay, now there it's gone. Now I'm going to change this RL from here, what it's just embedded itself as, to 100, 130, okay, which is the corresponding RL for this one here. Okay, and this one to 100,000. Okay. Okay, and then look in 3D, and that fixes it a little. What's happening there? Let's just see over here. So just check the RLs here. So there's an RL there. Okay, so that's 0, so that's why it's coming up as a bit funny. So that's going to be 100, 810. Okay, and then there we go. Great. Okay, now to explain that there is a little bit of a crevice happening here when there's not really one there, and that's because when we look at it on this side, so this is the right way up. Okay, so this is the right way up. and there's a little bit of a crevice just sitting there. And the reason is because there is no RLs on this side or this side. No, hang on. That one's 100, 690, and this one is 101, 730. This one, it's because these two are pulling it down somewhat, whereas this one has nothing to pull it down. Okay, so for the time being, just leave it. Okay, we're going to attend to this in a later exercise when we go and finish off the site. Okay, so just for the moment, just leave these. Okay, so now we've got 3 different mesh, okay, on the sites, and what we will do next is attend to drawing the roof here. Okay,